Hello everyone, greetings from National Resource Center for Education, Central University of South Bihar, Gaya, Bihar. I Dr. T.K. Basantia from School of Education, Central University of South Bihar, Gaya, Bihar, welcome you to the second session of the topic Subject Specific and Context Specific Pedagogy. You know that our previous or first session of discussion was based on the themes background of subject specific pedagogy and philosophical base and types of subject specific pedagogy. In this session, to go ahead, I would take opportunity to share with you on the theme pedagogy of language. This session would concentrate on three important aspects based on pedagogy of language. Those are understanding language context, common pedagogical principles of language, and pedagogical approaches to or techniques of language learning. I am sure that you will understand the different components of pedagogy of language from this session. Let us start with understanding language context. Language is a system of symbols and sounds. It is a medium or system for expressing our thoughts and feelings. It is the medium through which we are able to know ourselves. Different languages emerge out of the needs of the human beings. The progress of human beings in this earth has become possible to many extents because of the languages. The differences among human beings are reduced to great extent because of the language. Language acts as a medium for imparting knowledge in all the disciplines. Language has vocal or spoken as well as written forms. A language includes a body of words and the relationship among words to form sentences through which we convey our thinking, feeling, etc. to the others. When we say about acquisition of language or learning of language, the four basic skills of language learning come to our mind. The skills are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. The acquisition of these skills is the significant goal of any language class. Further, all these four skills are coordinated to one another and they are not separate or isolated entities in absolute sense. While listening and reading are known as receptive skills, speaking and writing are called productive skills. Further, listening and reading are called proactive or passive skills in one way, whereas speaking and writing are called active skills in other way. These four skills may be categorized like these aspects: listening, which is concerned with semantic aspect; speaking, which is concerned with phonetic aspect; reading, which is concerned with phonetic graphic aspect; and writing, that is concerned with graphic aspect. Listening with proper understanding, speaking fluently with proper stress, intonation, rhythm, etc., reading properly with ease and comprehension, and writing correctly and meaningfully are the focus of any language classroom or teaching learning situation. Development of cognition or understanding, emotion, value, feeling, attitude, etc. are embedded with development of language skills. The different ingredients that make the language system possible are vocabulary, grammar, etc. Literature is one important tool which facilitates language. Language along with literature intends to complete the language process. Language is taught or learnt different forms like prose, poetry, novel, supplementary or non-detailed reading, essay, composition, expository writing, grammar, etc. All these aspects of language help to make the conversation or communication possible, which is the prime goal of learning a language. The number of languages that a child learns depends upon the linguistic or socio-cultural context of his or her nation. For example, in Indian context, we normally expect that a child across school stages shall learn languages as per the 3-language formula recommended by Kothari Commission 1964-66. In Indian context, a child is expected to learn his or her mother tongue or home language or regional language or first language, whatever you can say. The international language English as a second language and national language Hindi or other languages including Sanskrit. But Indian socio-cultural context provides a learner to learn so many languages, not only 3 languages, as large number of languages are used in this country. But this is not the case of many other countries where opportunities are less to learn many languages. The focus of learning first language, second language and third language is not same, and it depends upon the purposes for which a language is acquired or learned. And for teaching learning of a language, some common pedagogical principles and approaches or techniques are followed. Let us discuss them one by one. Firstly, we will discuss common pedagogical principles of language. One principle is principle of purpose. Every language is learned with a purpose. The purpose of learning mother tongue or first language is different from the purpose of learning a second language or third language or any other languages. One learns second language for many reasons like academic reason, social reason, commercial reason, etc. If the purpose of language learning is clear, then it becomes easier to design the curriculum, decide the teaching learning materials, decide the pedagogy, conduct the evaluation, etc. Another principle is principle of accuracy. Achieving accuracy in listening, speaking, reading and writing is the main goal of language learning. One should strive to achieve accuracy in spelling, punctuation, vocabulary, grammatical forms and structures, intonation, stress on words, etc. while using a language. Language pedagogy must facilitate all that for achieving the accuracy. Another principle is principle of the use of active and passive vocabulary. In the process of learning a language, a learner encounters 2 types of vocabulary or words. Some words are familiar to the learners or the learners uses them well, and those are called active vocabulary. And the words that are less familiar to the learner or the learner finds difficulty to use them well are called passive vocabulary. So, in the passive vocabulary learning process, the pedagogical design shall be such that the learner would get adequate scope for the practice and use of such vocabulary, so that those can be converted into active vocabulary in due course of their practice and use. Another principle is principle of natural order of language skills. The language skills of most of the languages are normally learned in a natural order, that is listening at first, then speaking, then reading and lastly writing. In case of any language learning, first we listen it, then we speak it or produce the sound, then we read and then write. Even if the history of many languages of the world states that the languages are at first evolved as oral languages, then graphical shape is given to them. That is why we say languages are primarily vocal and their written forms appear later. Hence, in process of teaching learning of a language, one should proceed from oral aspect of language learning to the written aspect of language learning based on natural principle of language skills for development of the language proficiency. The next principle is phonetic principle. Basically, a language has 2 forms. One is vocal or spoken and another one is written. The expression of vocal language requires finer sound system by proper manipulating the speech organs in an individual. The phonetic principle of a language guides an individual to achieve command on vocal aspect of language. The phonetic principle of a language is associated with its pronunciation, stress, tone, intonation, etc. In the language learning process, the phonetic principles of a language must be given due emphasis. The next principle is principle of practice. Language is basically a skill dominated subject. If somebody wants to develop competency or mastery over a skill dominated subject, so he or she should go for practice of the different aspects of the same subject, because mastery over skill always requires proper practice or drill of the skill. While somebody learns mother tongue, he or she continuously remains in practice of the same because the environment demands or facilitates the same. But for learning of another language, one needs environment for the practice or drill of the language. Lastly, the principle of appreciation of the culture of the language. A language takes birth or is originated from a culture. That is why we say language learning is culture learning. If I learn a language, I must appreciate the culture of the language or the culture from which the language is originated. For example, if I learn English language, I must have a sense of appreciation or belongingness towards English language, as English language is originated from English culture. Like these principles, there are many other pedagogical principles of language learning which must be integral part of language learning process. Let us now focus our discussion on pedagogical approaches to or techniques of language learning. Some of the important pedagogical approaches or techniques used in language learning are direct method, structural approach, communicative approach, grammar and translation method, and inductive and deductive method. Let us discuss these one by one. First, let us take direct method. This method allows for direct and spontaneous use of a target language or language of learning in classroom or in teaching learning situation. In this method, conversation, discussion and reading are promoted in the target language without translating the target language in any other language or using any other language, including the mother tongue of the learner, and without stressing on the study of formal grammar of the target language. According to this method, listening and speaking of a language are more important than writing the language. In this method, sentences are regarded as unit of speech, but not individual words, and learning of grammar of the language is not end in itself, rather it is embedded in the use of language. Speech is primary as per this method. The method provides a natural atmosphere to the child to learn a language, and therefore this method is a natural method of learning a language. Let us now move to the structural approach. Structure refers to arrangement. Structure in language learning context normally implies the arrangement of words in a sentence in order to give a particular shape to the sentence. The structure may include word orders, grammatical patterns, etc. In any language, especially in English language, the way the words are put together following some principle is more important than joining the individual words at random. It means words are not grouped together randomly when we speak or write, rather they are arranged or structured in different orders as per the requirement. And these meaningful groups of words are called structures. The structure may include sentence pattern, for example, where will you go? Phrase pattern, for example, in lieu of. Idioms, for example, to kill two birds with one stone. The different structure words are prepositions, for example, of, at, in, etc. Relations, for example, who, whose, whom, etc. Conjunctions, for example, either, neither, so, etc. Articles, for example, a, the, etc. Degrees, for example, much, more, etc. Verb patterns, for example, subject plus verb plus object, etc. and many more. According to this approach, the vocabulary or content words like nouns, verbs, adjective, etc. are taught along with structures. Practice and development of mastery over structure of words of a language can lead someone for better learning of the language. Like direct method, in this approach, a language is taught to the learner directly without translating it to other languages, and here grammar is taught indirectly, or grammar learning becomes an embedded part of language learning. Development of the power of conversation or speech development is the prime focus of this approach, like direct method. Drill and exercise of the structures remains at the central point in this approach, like trade learning, where practice of a trade remains at the central point. Let us see another important approach to language learning, that is communicative approach. Communicative approach to language learning is such an approach which at the same time emphasizes on linguistic competence in one hand and ability to use the same competency in practical situation in other hand. This approach allows for developing all the four basic language skills like listening, speaking, reading and writing at a time and in an integrated way. It emphasizes on both oral communication and written communication at a time. This approach deals with practical aspect of classroom communication process. This approach of language learning is based on growth model of language learning rather than skill model of language learning, where language activities are understood from user point of view but not from the perspective of native speakers of the language. Under this approach, the learner gets an opportunity for his or her personal growth and self-expression, and a language is used for practical use of the society. This approach is defined as a functional approach to language learning, in which functional use of language is the ultimate purpose of learning a language. Achieving functional fluency and interaction is the goal of this particular approach. Therefore, according to this approach, language learning context must be purposeful, real and learner-centered. The syllabus, teaching learning process, teaching learning material, teaching learning environment, including all other aspects of a pedagogic system, must be graded for the functional use of the learner. Both qualitative and quantitative change in the linguistic environment of the learner is possible through this approach. Now let us focus on another important technique or method, that is grammar translation method. Grammar translation method is one of the oldest methods of teaching a target language to a learner. Target language here refers to a foreign language or a language other than the mother tongue or mother tongue equivalent language of the learner. This method has also a lot of importance for teaching learning of languages of the present day. Words, phrases, sentences, etc. of a target language are translated into mother tongue or mother tongue equivalent language of a learner or a language that a learner knows well. When the words, phrases, sentences, etc. of the target language are translated into the language of the learner or the language that the learner knows well, the learner can learn the target language well with the help of the translated words, phrases, sentences, etc. In this approach, much emphasis is given on grammar aspect of the target language. Since translation is used in this method, so here words, sentences, etc. are taught as isolated entities but not integrated tasks. In this method, too much emphasis is given on reading and writing skills but not on listening and speaking skills. Teacher may play a dominant role and learner may become somewhat passive in this method. Bilingual method of language learning is a method which has close affinity with grammar translation method of language learning. In bilingual method, the teacher or communicator uses the mother tongue or a language that the learner knows well to limited extent in the process of teaching learning of a target language for the better learning of the target language by the learner. Lastly, we will discuss inductive and deductive method. In language learning, mostly in grammar learning, inductive and deductive method is used more. This inductive and deductive method has two aspects, that is induction and deduction. Proceeding from particular to general is the main characteristics of induction, and proceeding from general to particular is the main characteristics of deduction. In this method, in grammar learning context, at first some instances relating to a grammatical rule are given. The learners are asked to find out or identify grammatical rule associated with the instances. This is known as induction. After learners have identified the grammatical rule associated with the instances, they are further given opportunity to create new situations or to identify some instances from the given situation associated with the grammatical rule, and this is known as application of grammatical rule, and this is called deduction. Let us take an example in this context. The principle of using the article a and n can be taught through inductive and deductive method in this way. These instances in front of the learners will be presented. I have an umbrella, she wants an orange, a dog is a pet animal, a university is a center of higher education, an educated person is superior to an illiterate person, an innocent person shall not be punished, Yadav has a computer, an apple is a nice fruit. The learners will analyze these instances with reference to the articles used before the vowel sounds and consonant sounds as indicated through underlining, and accordingly they will reach at the principle or derive the principle that before the vowel sound the article n is used and before the consonant sound the article a is used. Further, the learners will be given an opportunity for the practice or exercise of this principle in relation to some new instances. Like these approaches or techniques, there are many other approaches or techniques like social or cultural approach, situational approach, conversational approach, etc., which have implication or role in language learning. Friends, these are about the basic or fundamental aspects of pedagogy in relation to language learning context. Now, we will stop our discussion. We will further meet in our next session in this topic. Thanks for listening me. Thanks everyone. Bye.